You're listening to The Coaching Divas, a podcast for everyone navigating the twists and turns of corporate life.
Follow along as we chat through common workplace situations and extend the coach approach to help you handle them with ease.
We offer a cross-sectional view that spans generations, positions, workplaces, and lifestyles.
We're your hosts,
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, and we are
The Coaching Divas.
They say fake it till you make it. But what happens when you've made it and still feel like you're faking it? You've got the title, the experience, the wins, and yet there's this quiet voice whispering, maybe you just got lucky. Today, we're talking about imposter syndrome, that tricky blend of self-doubt and perfectionism that convinces us we don't belong, even when the evidence says otherwise. We'll explore where it comes from, how it shows up at work and in life, and why some of the most capable people feel it the most. Because here's the thing. Feeling like an imposter doesn't mean you don't belong. It often means you're stretching, growing, and doing something that actually matters. So if you've ever downplayed a win, deflected a compliment, or secretly wondered when everyone will find you out, this episode is for you. Let's get into it.
This is such an interesting topic. I really love it. Gosh, imposter syndrome. I will say I don't think I ever knew what it was until I started taking coaching and actually started talking about it.
In the sense that like having a label to it?
Having a label, having a concept, having something that is identifiable. Because in my mind, when I thought of my imposter syndrome, it came up as, well, you're not working hard enough. It wasn't me saying, that's just not the path for you. It was like let's take, my days when I was working full-time before I became a consultant. I was told, you're on the young leader path. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I don't think I deserve that. If I'm going to be a young leader and I'm going to become like these leaders, that's a really crappy way of looking at it. But then at the same time, I honestly didn't think I was capable of it. So I kind of reflect on my career choices, and I always use the expression, I love consulting because I love different projects. Like that was my tagline. But maybe it was because I was actually thinking I'm not good enough to become that VP.
It's interesting because I think I have a similar experience where I didn't realize that, in some situations, I also have imposter syndrome until it was explained to me partway through my career. And it was, as soon as it was explained, I was like, oh, yeah, I feel this all the time. You're telling me this isn't normal? You're telling me everybody doesn't just secretly doubt themselves or, strives for perfection, but tells everybody like they're good with 80%? What are you talking about? It is, I think, much more prevalent today than throughout the years past in terms of, how it shows up at work and sometimes even in life as well.
It's funny when I'm thinking about stuff right now, I'm thinking, especially in the conversations we've been having lately, I mean, it's been 40 years since I started my first career, which is just mind-blowing to me sometimes. And yeah, back then, imposter syndrome, that term didn't even exist, right? And it's interesting how I always felt I could do the job, but once I got that opportunity, I was so full of self-doubt saying, oh my God, what they do? They hired me. Am I going to be able to meet expectations? Can I do this? And I guess back then it was just considered self-doubt, lack of confidence. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a much better label or identifier for all those inner thoughts. And I think too, if you can identify it, you can maybe then start to address it, as opposed to just having all these doubts running through your mind and just fighting them tooth and nail all the way.
Yeah. And I think it's probably become more prevalent from, Claudia, when you first started your career to now. And when, let's say, a Gen Z is starting their career based on, I'd say, the environment that people have grown up in, right? It's such a high comparison, high standard environment, society. You throw in social media into that mix and, there's just such a everyday presence of comparison, whether you choose to or not. And social media plays a big part of that. And I think that fosters not necessarily imposter syndrome, but it fosters the traits, which is either self-doubt, fear of putting yourself out there, perfectionism, whether that's in your job or in life. And that can manifest in ways of like, always having this beautiful aesthetic in your home. Nothing is out of place. Like that could be signs of perfectionism, even in terms of your work of, you won't send it, you won't share it, present it, whatever it is, until, you've practiced it 10 times and you can say your whole script without looking at your notes and all that kind of stuff.
And then still being nervous or concerned when you send out that email or you do that presentation, you still have those feelings of, oh, is that right? Did I do it properly? Did I meet all expectations? It's a real tough one. And we're stuck in it. But we could get out of it though, can't we?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I'm going to use a little simple use case. Why have I never started snowboarding?
Why?
Why? And it's something that I always do the story. I'm a skier. I love skiing. I've tried snowboarding 3 times, and each time it was not for me because of. And then I come up with all of these explanations and excuses because that's what they are. And now I'm just looking at something I pulled up in our friend chat, and he says, the natural genius is a common type of imposter syndrome. Expects to master things quickly, struggles when learning takes time. Bam! That's why I didn't want to learn how to snowboard. It took time. So I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I've tried it 3 separate incidents, and that's enough for me. No, it's because I was actually really struggling with it, and I just didn't want to do it. So I didn't work through that discomfort. So there's that layer of imposter syndrome as well. It's easier to make an excuse for why I'm not going to bother trying to master it any further.
That's comfort zone, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Actually, Daniela, your example just kind of led me to, and your explanation kind of led me to thinking about people my age and my generation, how they shy away from technology. I have friends that be on email and maybe playing some Wordle games. They don't do anything on technology, and they are deathly afraid of it. And I wonder if that's some imposter syndrome popping up, saying, well, I'm not going to understand this, so I'm not going to do it. That way I could just say, brush it off, saying, oh, it's not for me. But as I keep trying to tell people in my circle, saying, well, if you don't, you're going to get left behind if you don't at least understand what it's all about. And so maybe just in our day-to-day activities, when we're just afraid to try something because it doesn't come to us naturally, and we're not willing to put the time in. So this imposter syndrome pops in all over the place, right? Whether you recognize it or not.
It's almost the active choice of like, okay, I'm done. Like, I don't want to keep growing. I don't want to keep being pushed outside my comfort zone. I don't want the uncertainty. So I'm just going to stay where I'm at. So I don't have to confront that and then potentially have imposter syndrome.
It's the fear of failure.
Absolutely. And that comes up here in the notes.
Yeah. Yeah. Fear of failure.
Yeah.
So what if you fail? Who's going to know?
Yep. It's interesting. It's not even who's going to know, but in any of my coaching dynamics, when we talk about fear, we often just think of the moment of fear, what's going to create that moment of, oh my God, what if I fail? And then all of your emotion, reaction, the action that you take or choose not to take is based off just thinking about that moment of where the fear is going to come true. And yet, if we took 30 seconds just to think about, okay, what's the first thing I'm going to do after it happens? Just think right past the fear. The sense of not relief necessarily, but the confirmation that you can get through it comes so much faster than most people realize or give themselves credit for. So instead of saying, oh my God, what if I fail? It's, okay, what if I fail? What's the first thing I'm going to do? And as soon as you start thinking about what am I going to do after that point, you realize that it's just a sequence that's going to get you to stand back up. I'm going to cry. I'm going to call my mom. I'm going to, scream into a pillow. And then once I get through that emotion, I'm going to sit down and think about, okay, how could I have done better? Maybe I'll start, tackling the problem again. Maybe I'll sleep on it. The thoughts just start coming and you realize there is still life after the point of fear.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. With a couple of clients I've been coaching, we've been talking about, I don't want to take that action, but I know I should. So then I do the flip side. Well, what would happen if you did take that action? What would that look like? And playing that out is another approach that I often use for myself as well to kind of flip the script, I call it, right? And say, what does the other side look like? You're here. What other options are there on the table? And as we're talking through this, that's all about working through our imposter syndrome, which is actually a very powerful driver of our inaction.
And I think part of it too is, Daniela, the example you gave is to help them break it down into manageable steps. Because I think a lot of times they say, well, I need to do this. Well, that's a big step you're trying to take. And you break that down so you have successes along the way and you have positive experiences. And that way, when you do get to the ultimate goal, you're there already. You don't even realize you got there because the steps were manageable. Because I know people just seem to jump to the big step. I need to do this. Well, how the heck do you get there? And I think that's where people start to, well, never get there. Well, we haven't broken down the steps to exactly to what you're discussing, Daniela. You got to help them manage through it, for sure.
Well said, Claudia. The other thing that's come up as a common type of imposter syndrome is the expert. They feel they have to know everything before taking an actual action. So there's none of, we always talk about curiosity mindset and creativity and letting yourself play. If you're leaning into your expert, you're not doing any of that. You're not giving yourself that runway to really test the boundaries, right? So the use case you gave, Claudia, about your friends are not, dabbling into technology. There's going to come a day, maybe in 5 years, where everything has to be a digital ID. What do you do then?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. Technology is not going away. It's getting more and more powerful. It's creeping into our everyday life. And they're struggling because I have a lot of people who have elderly parents and they make comments like, well, they can't travel because when you get to the airport, it says we'll struggle with them because everything's done at a kiosk, et cetera, et cetera. And I almost feel like saying to them, well, what do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Because these are people who love to travel. You think it's going to get any easier for you? I mean, again, the whole fingerprint eyeball scanning is going to be coming up pretty quickly. And if you're not familiar with it, you're going to be left behind. It creeps in all sorts of different ways. And, and I do kind of feel for the younger generation because social media is such a big part of it. Expectations are set so high. And even though they realize that social media isn't reality, they still believe it's reality.
I'm going to challenge that with the idea that social media isn't actually something to strive for, but rather it's a curated experience. Because when Facebook was up and coming, I saw tons of people posting, likes and photos and all these experiences and creating like this genre of, joie de vivre. We're living it up. And behind the scenes, a couple of them I knew were, at each other's throats at home or really not happy with each other. And so what was on Facebook was not what was going on in the home. And it's funny because at one point I kind of got caught up in that, like, well, I'm not living that life. I'm not as exciting as would they. And then I thought, you know what? That is all perception. That is all putting up a false sense. So as much as we want to say social media is creating this idea to strive for, I'm going to call BS on that. And I'm going to say it's one person's curation of what's possible. And I really wish we could separate ourselves from that and really remember that it's like a magazine. It's like the old days of Vogue and Bazaar Weekly and all those other little, Sweet 16, whatever I had when I was a kid, where it was all, acting to some extent.
I'm going to challenge your perspective because I do think it's the problem in the sense that we have what you just said of like, it's one person's perception. We are in a place of knowing that, whereas a lot of people who consume social media haven't made that connection and believed that connection. Sure, it's been told to them, and yet they're still doom scrolling before they go to sleep or posting their highlight reels because they're seeking some type of comparison or looking for that reassurance that, oh my God, okay, I just did this as well. This big influencer posted it too. I must be on the right track. I have all the right things in my life or whatever it is. And to me, imposter syndrome or a trait of imposter syndrome in the workplace is seeking constant reassurance or feedback to confirm your worth and your value. Social media does that for anybody who posts and engages. Likes is reassurance, comments is feedback, and as long as it's positive, as long as you get tons of likes and amazing complimentary comments, you're validating your worth. And so if you aren't aware of that and you're struggling with imposter syndrome, or you're making that comparison and you're engaging in social media, you're feeding that gremlin voice in you. You're not necessarily taking the action to step away.
I gotta say, that's a generational thing I wasn't even thinking of. How? Like, my brain's just kind of, fireworks are going off. But I like the way you created that analogy to that person that always needs the validation from everybody. Good job, well done, you succeeded. It's funny so I'm going to talk on a personal level. For me, imposter syndrome shows up in other ways. It doesn't show up in that validation experience, but it does show up in that comparison. And although it shouldn't, it does. And I realized, even as we were prepping for this call, share with you guys a little story. I won't bring it up here, but it is a really great example that even when we think we are so educated on coaching and all of these other things, imposter syndrome has shown up for me even in coaching sometimes, in some of the coaching experiences and workshops I step into, because I hear what all these other coaches are doing, and then I'm like, it's a side hustle for me right now.
Yeah, you downplay it.
Yeah.
Downplaying it is definitely imposter syndrome, or that self-doubt creeping in.
Yeah. I'm going to have to jump in with Daniela when it comes to the whole comparison thing. Because even people in my generation, while we should be stable in our decisions, most of my friends are retired, we're all kind of, living the life as it is. You still see people comparing each other to one another. Oh, look at the car they bought. How can they afford that car? Oh, my goodness. How does that happen? Oh, they must be in debt or something, right? All these nastiness comes up because you are constantly comparing. And again, is that your imposter syndrome coming out and being very judgy about the other person that's coming across. So maybe it not be validation as it is for your generation, Misha, and the ones younger than yourself. But I'm with Daniela. It's all about comparison. We're not seeking validation, but we're saying, hey, I'm not as good as they are, so I better go out and buy that expensive car or go on that fabulous trip as well. Because it's not camaraderie. It's much more competition to say, oh, then I can post on Facebook because we still post on Facebook.
Yeah.
There's a name for that, the superhero.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Don't get me wrong. My generation definitely is a victim to comparison as well. I think anyone in my generation or in Gen Z that consumes social media but does not participate in it, so they only watch, they don't really comment, they don't post at all. To me, that could be an act of comparison. And it's quite a dangerous one because you're doing it behind the scenes. You don't really engage anyone in a conversation about it. You're not sitting there next to your neighbors saying like, how the heck did they afford that car? You're sitting with yourself and only your thoughts, looking at images or videos and saying, how the hell did they afford that? Or I want that. How come I can't have that? Oh my God, this person and I went to school together. How did they end up so much more successful than I am? And because there is the lack of dialogue, I'd say sometimes that comparison can make people spiral even further. And so where I want to bring this up to a positive place or a helpful place is, I'd say in my own journey for unpacking my own imposter syndrome, one of the books that I had come across, Taming Your Gremlin, really helped me understand that imposter syndrome voice, that comparison voice, self-doubt, perfectionism voice, whatever you want to label it, that is your gremlin voice. That is not necessarily you and what you have to choose or want to choose to believe. And so I think if you can separate those, it can start to help you work through those thoughts. You can start to say to yourself, like, you know what, it's fine that that person has that car or that kind of lifestyle or this perfectly curated life. Good for them. It's fine. I don't need that. What I need from all of that is maybe just a roof over my head. So let's strive for that. And I don't have to compare myself. I can choose not to. Now, that's your voice. That's you saying that. Your gremlin will constantly creep up and be like, ooh, like that person bought this. We should buy this. And it's like, no, I don't need that. We don't need that. Let's move on. And so I think if you can start to separate it out and not label your imposter syndrome voice as just you, there can be more than one voice. I think that's a tool or a mechanism to start helping people to work through it.
I think you're bang on. Even if we take that a step further back, number one is just be aware. Acknowledge that these feelings are common. And they're not an actual inadequacy. It's a feeling. And also think about, I mean, Misha, you said it beautifully. It's reframing your thinking. It's really reframing it when that word of I don't or I wish or how come it's not me comes up. Flip it to, well, I've started here and I'm going to incrementally get better. And I think for me, it's I've been practicing that a lot for the last 2-3 years. I'm going to make certain choices because I need to do certain things. And I used the expression once, I'm late to the game in buying a house. I've stopped saying that. I actually lean into saying I bought a house. And I'm proud of that.
Good for you.
And it's taken me a little while to get there, right? To kind of say I deserve to buy that house. Just like I deserve my seat at the table where I am. Just like, I see certain things in the workplace. I'm like, well, should I be Should I be applying myself differently? For a while, I was okay, I'm not going to do that. And then certain opportunities have come up and I said, okay, now it's time for me to do that. But again, it's not because I don't feel I'm capable, but because I'm actually giving myself that space to explore. How about you, Claudia?
I was just thinking to myself, it's interesting when you take your own advice, isn't it? We're coaching other people, do this, do that. And then you kind of look at yourself and you kind of go, oh yeah, maybe I should do a bit of that. Actually, your story reminded me, Daniela, is that, because as you know, I've got 2 daughters who are both Gen Zs. Is that like late millennials, Gen Zs? And they're looking at former school colleagues as to see where they are in their career path or their life path. And it may not be the same place where my daughters are at. And the one thing I always keep telling them is that every journey is different. You don't know where they started and you don't know where they're going and you don't know when they've peaked. So the path may look smooth now, but you just never know where someone else is going to be or what they've had to overcome or what help they had along the way. So you really cannot compare one journey to another. It's hard for them to hear it, and I can understand that, but you certainly have to be able to, again, take a little bit of your own advice and kind of start to believe that, you know what, my time will come. And you really have to believe that, because I certainly, plugged along and kept my eyes closed half the time, hoping I land on my feet. And if you don't, you kind of stand up and redirect. Because I always knew where I wanted to go. I just always didn't know the path to get there. Life throws hurdles in your way, and you just have to figure out how I'm going to get past this and not have it totally block you all the way, right?
Mm-hmm. If I were to build on that, I'm a big believer that like what's meant for you will come and find you. The addition to that is you also have to be doing the work to get there. I think if you just blindly say like, yeah, it's everything's going to work out, I'm just going to sit at home all day and do nothing and not put myself out there, then I'm not convinced that it's going to come and find you. And so I think part of that is because you also just articulated this in how you approached it, which was you knew where you wanted to go. You just didn't know how you were going to get there, but you were likely taking steps every single day to inch your way closer and closer and closer to wherever you wanted to go. And so I think in today's generation, sometimes they don't know where they want to go, which can be hard. But there's also the kind of drive or society expectations to achieve something. And so I believe that most people want to achieve something. They might not know what they want to achieve, but there is this general sense of it. And it's more of how do you make sure that you're constantly working towards it. You're not kind of just waiting for life to just present itself on a silver platter to you.
Yeah, that's so well said, Misha, because what's come up is adopt a learning mindset. You're not proving yourself, you're improving yourself. And you're not the expert of everything. It's again, I'm going to use the word, incrementally growing. And each opportunity, even if it's small or seems meaningless to you, how do you turn that into a learning stretch? And the funny thing about a learning mindset, I didn't even think of it in that context, but I've always had a learning mindset. But what I recognize now as I read the word, I was always proving myself rather than improving. Because it's a very different, the word improving myself implies adding to my toolkit. And that's what I bring to my coachees, especially with the work that I'm doing from a career coaching perspective. I've tried to shift people away from thinking of always proving themselves, but rather showing how they're improving on their resume and how that's going to make a difference for where they want to go is what matters. And utilizing that notion of I'm adding to my toolkit. Doesn't matter how small or big. It's less about, seeking validation from others and more about recognizing that each of these little steps along the way is something that you can apply and add. Maybe, I think there was something I read that said add it to your own recognition toolkit, your own reward system.
Yeah. Interesting term, recognition toolkit.
I just came up with that. I don't know. But I feel like it's something we don't. And I use that word, and as I'm just like reflecting as I said it, because sometimes brilliance comes out when you least expect it. Daniela's little joking humor here. I think I have been over the last 5 years. I've been utilizing that unconsciously, and it's helped me like grow along my path, overcoming some of my own challenges and traumas to really put into play. This is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. And I'll reflect back on it. And I think this also ties into what we did last year when we kind of ended the year celebrating and recognizing what you've done that was great.
I'm glad you said the word celebrating, because that recognition toolkit, I think celebration is a big part of it. And it doesn't have to be that, you throw a party every time you do something, but it is a mechanism for you to give yourself a moment to acknowledge the achievement and recognize your own efforts that were put into it to get there. And so, the example of buying a home, no matter what age you are, that is a massive achievement. That is something you should feel proud of. And so being able to celebrate that, whether it's in words, whether that's through reflection, whether that's through something, external wise, buying yourself a cupcake or whatever it is, there still needs to be a moment where you recognize it and you celebrate it. And I think that helps to unpack some of the imposter syndrome, because then once you can do it in your personal life, you can start to do it in your work life as well. And you start to then build that muscle of confidence, and the self-doubt kind of dissipates because you have the evidence of why you belong to be where you are.
Absolutely.
So that's all done internally, right? All this celebration in some ways. Like, you buy yourself a cupcake, or you do this, you do that. What about, you're so proud of an achievement that you throw yourself a big party and you invite everybody to that? I know people who would kind of refuse to have, for example, when I've known people, earlier generations than mine, who kind of don't want to throw themselves like a 50th anniversary party because they know not all their friends have reached 50 years of marriage type of thing, because they don't want to kind of rub it in their face. What's that? Is that imposter syndrome? Or is that just being courteous to your friend group and just maybe not throwing your success in their face, or accomplishments or achievements in their face? I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it's one thing. I could see elements of imposter syndrome in that, because they're downplaying their own achievement. They're minimizing achievement. Minimizing achievements is kind of a trait towards imposter syndrome. And I think part of that is also they might not want to do that because they're either minimizing the achievement, or they don't want to put themselves in a scenario where people are constantly complimenting them for it and giving themselves praise, like giving them praise of saying like, oh my God, that takes so much work. Congratulations. And they don't want to sit there and be like, yes, it did. And I'm so happy about like that we've made it. They struggle with that. They struggle to accept that praise or that compliment, and they'll downplay it in the moment, be like, it was nothing, like go grab some food, grab a drink, whatever. And then they deflect to something else. So maybe they don't want to put themselves in that situation. If those are the cases, then maybe it is a little bit of imposter syndrome creeping in.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, right? I'm just wondering, because it's funny, because while we say imposter syndrome is not a good thing, if humility is celebrated, right? But at the same time, does it need to be celebrated? Or should it be maybe, you know what, you did do a hell of a job on that contract or that project, or congratulations on hitting 60 years of marriage or whatever it is. But yet where a lot of, especially as we talked earlier, a lot of cultures will not celebrate the big achievement. I find it interesting how they don't want to, we don't want to rub it in people's face as well.
So I get a sense there. I mean, if I had to put on my coaching hat, my question would be, what are you fearful of? Because I'm hearing we don't want to rub it in their face. But at the end of the day, I, as an individual, don't own anybody else's reaction. And if the perception that I think I'm going to be giving off is I don't want to rub it into their faces. What assumptions am I making about those in my community or circle that I'm, for lack of a better word, deflecting from my own self? So what am I fearful of? What is the root cause that's holding me back? Because maybe, and I don't know the situation, and everyone has a different thing, but was I faking those 50 years of happiness? Or is there something else going on? So whoever it is that doesn't want to celebrate that moment, if it's because of other people's judgment, I think that is a sense of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of, quandering here because I've seen both, right? I've seen people go over the top because they are trying to prove something to themselves and to other people. And then I've seen other people who have had great successes, and yet, you can barely get them out to celebrate over a glass of wine because they move on to the next thing already. It's just like, it's interesting, the two extremes that you find.
I think both of those are examples of this imposter syndrome coming through. One could be the soloist, the other one could be the perfectionist.
Yeah. Interesting. No, it's good. It's interesting.
I was going to say too that celebration is really a personal preference. Some people can get enough satisfaction in celebrating with just one or two people. Some people want a party. And so, if I think about the 50, 60 year anniversary, in a moment like that, if you're somebody who's a little bit more quaint in terms of celebration and stuff like that, maybe it's enough that you and the person that you made it 50, 60 years with go out, have an incredible meal, go somewhere special, and share and celebrate that moment together. And that's enough for you. That is that recognition and celebration of the milestone versus somebody who is like, no, I want to have a whole party. I want to celebrate with the people that have made these 50, 60 years possible, because it wasn't just the two of us. It was all of our friends and family who supported us through hard times. And we want to celebrate that together. And that's going to feel like that moment of accomplishment for them. And so I think it really just depends on what satisfaction you get in the levels of celebration.
That's a great way to put it, Misha. Thank you. Yeah. It's interesting, though. I find it very interesting. So, as always, ladies, great discussions. I think we've had a little bit of back and forth as to what imposter syndrome really means across generations and across different sorts of recognitions and accomplishments. Any takeaways from our discussion today?
Couple of things. One, I don't think imposter syndrome goes away. I think it's a part of who we are. I think it'll surprise us when it comes up. But, we kind of touched on this a bit. Have an awareness about it and try to reframe your thinking.
I agree. I think my big takeaways are, 1, sometimes we should take our own advice. 2, very in line, Daniela, what you just said is imposter syndrome doesn't necessarily go away. I think it's a muscle that we have to train and put time and effort into to be able to manage it. And even when we have it managed, it'll creep up in different situations, but it's knowing that you've built the muscle to be able to have the awareness, do the reflection, celebrate milestones, things like that you can work yourself through it no matter what situation you come into.
That's good. I would say, yeah, imposter syndrome is probably something that's come up recently and it's actually been labeled because, like I said, in my early days, it was considered self-doubt, lack of confidence. And so it's nice that we're actually able to put more than just a label, but more of an identification as to what it is. So you can identify it, challenge it. And as you mentioned earlier, Misha, that gremlin voice, recognize it as that gremlin voice and just say, you know what? I'm not going to listen to you anymore. It's time to move on.
Thanks for listening to The Coaching Divas. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review and follow us on Instagram at The Coaching Divas.
Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it.
Until next time, we are
Claudia Jones,
Daniela Velkovic,
and Misha Jethba, The Coaching Divas.
If you're going to coach, might as well coach like a diva.